LEGO video games have always been one of the more widely beloved experiences through almost every single generation of gaming. With over 100 games releasing in the span of the last 4 decades, it's no surprise that this medium is enjoyed by people of all ages. Kids, teenagers, even a wide number of adults. On my 5th birthday, my grandparents bought my family a Nintendo Wii and this LEGO Star Wars droid set, since as a kid I was super into LEGOs. I remember going onto the family computer and looking up something along the lines of LEGO video games, and I saw a little game titled The Complete Saga pop up. Just like many other kids, this game helped define my childhood, and I tend to go back to it just about once a year. And let me tell you, once the news broke of a brand new LEGO Star Wars game releasing, I knew I just had to have it. But to be completely honest with you guys, I hadn't really kept up with the more modern day games. The most recent one I remember playing being Lord of the Rings. I had gotten busy with things such as college or work or clubs and didn't really have time to play every single one of these almost yearly releases. It felt to me like I had missed, at some point along the line, a huge fundamental evolution in this franchise. So I went onto Steam and I bought a couple of the more recently released games, or rather, ones that I felt helped usher in the new open world era of this franchise. However, to me it felt like a lot of the magic was gone in the more modern releases. Sure, they're great games overall, but there was just something missing. There's a certain charm the older games have, especially ones like Complete Saga and Indiana Jones 1, but gradually over time, the games were kind of losing that. You could chalk it up to things such as the levels becoming shorter to compensate for bigger hub worlds, combat becoming a lot more complicated, or the games just generally having a too high level of polish that doesn't allow for as much imagination. But regardless, this made me a little bit nervous for the release of the Skywalker Saga. What if the game lost itself in the complexity? I mean, in the trailers for this game, there seems to be a lot going on, maybe almost too much. A huge character menu with tons of different classes, an almost too robust HUD, and an RPG-like upgrade system. Just the vast expanse of this new adventure made me feel a bit skeptical. And I'm here to tell you that I was absolutely wrong. Now, I could sit here for literal hours and talk about all the things this game does right, but to be completely honest, it all traces back to one central point. Well, 3 points actually, but we'll touch on that in a second. As I mentioned, one of my biggest fears was the Skywalker Saga focusing too much on reinventing that formula through more complex and robust features like upgrades and character classes, and, as a result, making the rest of the game feel overbearing and confusing. And to be fair, it does take a minute to get used to the new menu navigation in the Skywalker Saga. Even just the simple act of selecting my character took me a minute to understand at first, not to mention how to navigate the entire f***ing galaxy. But by the end of the first episode, I had pretty much gotten it all figured out. In fact, by the end of the first level that I played, that being Negotiations, I had already learned and what felt like mastered the entire Jedi class. I was easily pulling off combos, solving Force-related puzzles, and tossing droids around the room with ease. It just felt so natural. Even as someone who hadn't played a more modern LEGO game again, I fully understood it. This took me by surprise. I thought I would have a much harder learning curve when it came to getting used to all of the new abilities and skills each character is uniquely outfitted in. But as I said, it just came naturally. Now let's jump forward to when I started A New Hope and the first level of that movie. I hadn't experimented much with the hero or the blaster class, and I was going in mostly blind. But once again, I found myself solving everything I needed to do with ease. And not in a bad way like it was just way too easy, but more of like an instant understanding of what was going on. It took me up until the unlock of the Scoundrel class in the next part of A New Hope to realize just how perfectly subtle the exposure to new mechanics are in this game, and how well they make it flow. So with that extremely long-winded intro out of the way, let's dive into the Skywalker Saga and the art of subtle game design. Starting off, what exactly do I mean about subtle game design? When I say the phrase subtle game design, I'm referring to something you learn within the game that isn't explicitly stated to you. For example, take this wall right here. Nothing tells me explicitly to walk up to it, but because of those glowing lines, I'm incentivized out of my curiosity. I'm expecting to be rewarded by either story progression or an extra bonus by at least checking out what's up. Now, the same exact lightsaber wall thing is used again in the game in multiple different sections to solve different puzzles, open doors, or find mini-kits. Because of the placement of the door being right on the main path, which invites me to investigate and use it, whenever I see another glowing line, I'll know, oh, I need a lightsaber for this. Through the repeated exposure of this puzzle, it will eventually become second nature. Now, think of the rest of this level. While the game does explicitly say you can use the Force to move objects, it doesn't tell you what you're able to use them for, just that you are able to move them around. Ultimately, it's up to you, the player, to figure out you're able to do things such as throw them to deal damage. Now I want you to picture how the first hallway is laid out. You see some crates you're able to pick up, maybe throw, but ultimately just break open for studs. But then you come across this thing, which you aren't aware is an explosive until you hit it and, well, die. But once you're done dying, at least in my case, I thought, what if I threw this explosive at an enemy? And not even 2 seconds later, a shielded droideka shows up, and I put 2 and 2 together to figure out how to kill an armored enemy quickly. It's such a simple and common trope, but this game does it so well. I know the Skywalker Saga isn't the first sandbox-inspired combat-type game, and it definitely isn't the first to use this tactic of subtle game design, but it is quite incredible that I didn't even realize they had disguised the very first level as a secret Jedi tutorial mission until after I had beaten the entire episode. When you give the player the tools to explore their options in an environment that provides all they need and all that they need to know, it really does allow the player's creativity to take hold. Which, funnily enough, is exactly what real-life Legos try and do. As I said earlier, there are 3 major points where I was able to trace back this idea of subtle game design to, and it just so happens to be located in all 3 of the first levels available to the player. Take for example our next level, the first one in A New Hope. At first, this may seem like the most basic introductory level in any video game ever, teaching you the basics such as pulling levers, grappling, doing droid panel stuff, aiming down your sights, all new things to this game. But remember, this game also puts a huge emphasis on the class of character you are playing. In this level, you're able to play as Leia, this rebel dude, R2, and C-3PO. Out of these 4 characters, you get to experience using 3 different classes. Because there are no Jedi in this level, you get to experience the things that Jedi can't do. For example, hit these targets, which requires a blaster, or a hero character. Jedi also can't grapple in all situations. You need a blaster character for that. While Jedi can aim down their sights when throwing their saber, they don't get as precise hits as blasters do. Not to mention, neither hero nor Jedi can access the astromech and protocol panels. If you're a brand new player to this game, you'll learn the difference between those 2 droids. You also get to figure out, as I'm sure almost every returning player was surprised to learn, that protocol droids now have actual uses besides just being slow. They're able to build, break apart, and even fight. If you haven't caught on yet, this level is the exact same as Negotiations, but instead of being for the Jedi class, it's for the hero class, astromech, and protocol droids. It is once again a tutorial in disguise. In fact, by default, this is the very first level the game wants you to play, since when you start a new profile, this is the first episode the game is normally on, and it's pretty easy to see why. Moving away from just the class tutorials, this level also does an amazing job of showcasing the new idea of branching paths within these levels, which was a huge selling point in the trailers. When you build this cannon, you have 2 choices, either break the door or put out the fire. Either one of these choices progresses you, but it makes sure to alert the player that there is more than one way to skin a womp rat. Even Negotiations did that same thing, but in a much less noticeable fashion, since the hallways do tend to blend together a little bit more. Now let's talk about our 3rd usage of this trope, and probably also our weakest example, The Force Awakens. In true sequel trilogy fashion, the first couple of levels in this episode are pretty messy, and you spend most of your time in the overworld, rather than actually getting into some action. But it still does incorporate elements of a subtle tutorial in these sections. It may not be as disguised as the other two examples, but within the first two levels of this episode, you get to learn more about the game elements as opposed to just the class differences. Just like with A New Hope, you're able to wear Stormtrooper gear to open up weapon panels and throw grenades. But in the Force Awakens level, it is much more encouraged. You're able to utilize this to help turn off the alarms and make dealing with the hordes of enemies a whole lot easier. You then get to take control of Rey and the Scavenger class, which honestly might be my least favorite part of the game so far. This is kind of where they throw subtlety out the window, with constant command prompts telling you, press B to build a glider, press B to build a gun, which really distracts from the overall experience. I don't know if they just assumed nobody would start with this trilogy, but it doesn't cover for the fact that it is kind of lazy. There is still an attempt to include some form of subtlety here, but it gets lost in the constant command prompts. Anyways, let's do a quick summary and then move on to why this design is so important for this game in specific. So, what have we covered? TT Games is no beginner when it comes to letting the player take the reins in terms of how they want to play a game. They do this by carefully structuring not only individual starting levels, but also almost entire episodes as tutorial missions inside the main story to help give players mastery over the abundance of new mechanics and character classes. They do this in the best way possible, by not interrupting the player's experience, for the most part. They allow the player to investigate things they think might work, such as throwing explosives, picking up droids, or cutting open doors. This subtlety not only allows for the general flow of the game to progress smoother, but also makes the player feel accomplished and smart for figuring out its little quirks. But why is this so important? Obviously, lots of games use this exact tactic, so why am I so impressed here? Well, it's because of this game's target audience. The Skywalker Saga is going to be played by two main crowds, little idiot babies or grown-ass men who played the complete saga growing up. A lot of the more mature fans of this game have only ever played the complete saga and not many other LEGO games. It has always been in the top 3 best-selling games in this franchise and is the one people cite nostalgia with the most. Almost every single LEGO game meme, like LEGO Yoda, comes from the complete saga. Now imagine going straight from this to this. Returning players who aren't up to date with the new format of these games would find a lot of these new changes jarring, and those who do try to play this game like the complete saga, with ground slams and jetpacks everywhere, are not going to find as much enjoyment. TT Games needed to show that this was a completely different game, and while they both may be Star Wars, they could not be any more different. Kind of like a, hey, the Force was changed quite a bit, and you may have not played LEGO Star Wars 3, why don't you try blowing this thing up, or I don't know, throwing your lightsaber? And when an old head player does that, they're gonna be like, damn, I have a lot to learn. In order to demonstrate these changes, it uses this form of subtle guidance. And for the dumb idiot kid side of things, the other side of the audience, I don't know, man, they're kids, they'll find anything fun. If you've enjoyed this dissection, it would mean a lot if you gave this video a like and sub to my channel. I'd love to do these little dissections for every LEGO game. Speaking of that, if you want to help be a part of history, I'm currently working with a team to archive and preserve every single LEGO property ever made, even the Cartoon Network Flash games. So you can click that little link down below to join my Discord and send me a DM to get hooked up. We could use the help. Expect more LEGO Star Wars content soon, but in the meantime, I've been BD1P. Peace out and goodbye.